Hey everyone, it's Stephanie, and you are tuned into the review of Love at First Flight, Season 1, Episode 3. So this week we find the couples in Sedona, which is a very cool place. If you guys don't know about Sedona, it is said to be probably one of the most highest energy fields out there. And so a lot of people go to meditate, and there's a lot of spiritual practices that happen there. And of course, there's beautiful scenery. People do a lot of things there. So the couples this week were in Sedona, and a lot of things happened. It was a pretty jam-packed episode, so let me just kick it off. Stephanie and Ryan. So Stephanie and Ryan end up doing a couple of things. They go on it's like a golf course, but they end up playing something that's a mixture between golf and soccer. And you start to see like the little changes in their dynamic. He was really excited about it, and he as in Ryan, talked about how, it doesn't really matter if you're not always up for what your significant other wants to do. It's important to kind of just get in the game regardless. It's just part of being in a relationship. Sometimes you watch the movie you don't want to watch. Sometimes you go somewhere you don't want to go, because it's all about the union of the relationship. Sometimes you do what you don't want to do. And we found that Stephanie was not the best sport. So not only is this reflective of probably how she's been doing things, but we also have something at stake. We have the hotel accommodation. So Ryan is kind of, feeling like it's a little bit of a buzzkill because she's not really exhibiting the best attitude, and also he wants to make sure that they win. And she kind of says, I don't get it, this isn't my thing, I don't really want to do it. And so she's kind of trotting along and being there and participating enough to say I did it, but she really didn't do it. And you can see his growing frustration, and you can see him kind of try to give her some positive reinforcement and say, hey, you just got to do it. And you see them kind of get into a little bit of a toggle, but it didn't really escalate. Eventually things turned around, and what is great about them is things turned around even in the face of when they thought they didn't win. So the assumption was that they weren't going to be able to stay into the luxury suite, but they were going to stay in the motel. And then they got a text message saying that, the name of the game was to work together, so they still were going to get the accommodations, which was great. And they were super excited. But it is an indication of where, Stephanie has room to grow, and kind of how Ryan shows up and sees things in a way that is beneficial in that moment for that relationship. So I enjoyed seeing that. Towards the end of the episode, we watched them talk about the future and where they could possibly live. Like throughout the episode, you'll see Stephanie talk about how she's really beginning to care for him, and she's falling for him, and they take a nighttime dip together in the pool. And so she has that like crush that we have like in high school or middle school. That first intense crush is what you're seeing with her. And so she's scared to leap because she's looking back at old experiences, and we all do that, where we're apprehensive because of past negative experiences, and you really want to leap into something, but you don't want it to turn out like the rest, but you don't want to be so traumatized that you miss out on a good thing. So you see her kind of going back and forth throughout the confessionals, throughout the episode. What happens, and a lot of times we can relate this to real life, is when things start going really well, we tend to get into a place where we start to self-sabotage, whether it's conscious or subconscious. So we're looking for things that will get in the way of us getting more attached, and so we can now protect ourselves. So she starts discussing, where do you want to live? Where could you possibly see yourself living? And he's saying the Midwest and maybe Colorado or South Carolina, I believe he mentions. And she's just a New York girl. She wants to be in New York. And he's saying that he really doesn't want to be there. And, her excuses, is something along the lines of her mom is close to her dog. I mean, excuse my eye roll, but listen, if you meet someone that you want to spend your life with, your mom's relationship with your dog is not priority, and so that's, as I was watching it, I was like, okay, she's really so apprehensive that she's looking for ways that this is not going to work. She doesn't know she's doing that, but that's what's happening, because realistically, why are we talking about this right now? So if I were to be, in the next hotel room as the expert and I met with them in between the cities, I would say, Stephanie, you don't need to be thinking about these things right now. You need to be committed to just getting to know this person to see if it's something that will work out instead of getting in your own way, because it doesn't matter. The reality is, if you fall in love and you guys want to live in a certain place and it works for the both of you all, bye, mom. Say goodbye to the dog, because we got to go and we got to start our lives together. So I started seeing a little bit of that towards the end of their segment, which let me know that she is really falling deep for him. Whether it's love, I use that loosely because it's probably been like 10 days or whatever it is, or just like really, really good chemistry that could possibly lead to that. So that is Stephanie and Ryan. Stephanie and Michael, they actually end up going to I believe it's an ice cream shop where they throw a party and they are in charge of a party for a bunch of kids, which is a lot of work because I think these kids range from probably 5 or 6 to maybe 10 or 11, and it's a lot of them. So this is a great experience for the two of them because we get to see what their roles are and how they play together in something that really requires them to be on in terms of making sure that all the kids are safe and all the kids are accounted for, but also they have to be personable and they have to be fun because these are kids now. So we kind of change the way we talk to kids. When my nieces or my nephew walks in, I'm more high pitched or I'm sweeter or make little jokes and sing little songs. That speaks to the nature of who you will potentially be in rearing children. And since the show is kind of like, let's travel and see if we can get married, of course, children often, for most people, are the next step. And so it was good for them to see how their dynamic worked. And their dynamic worked really well, and they both acknowledge how their dynamic worked together in terms of Stephanie kind of being, very organized and making sure that things were done, but also having a fun time. And Michael got to be the guy who was just having fun with the kids, making sure that they're good, but being more of the jokester. And she was happy with him playing that position because it kind of took the weight of that off of her, but she knew that they were well taken care of. And she even said she enjoyed watching that Michael interact with the kids and just get a different side of him, because she has mentioned, I see Playboy Michael all the time, and so I want to see somebody else. And so she was able to see somebody else, and that worked out really well for them. They had a good time towards most of the episode. Towards the end, however, they went to a ceramics class and they were just playing around. And of course, here goes Michael with the little sexual innuendos, because they did, it's kind of like if anybody has seen Ghost, where Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze do the whole ceramic, like the pot making with the water, and they're like sculpting, and they were doing that. And so he makes a couple of comments, and that turns her completely off. She's not really interested, and she even says, that's the frat boy that I really don't want to be interested in. It completely turns her off. And so, but he's joking, of course, but they're not there yet, so she can't really even take that in, and she shuts down. So we see and she said, I think at this point, I think it was like the episode or the first or the second episode where she says she's not good at communication. We see how not good at communication she is, because she pretty much shuts down. She says she doesn't want to talk about things, and when he kind of continues to prompt her, she gives a little bit, but really she may as well have continued not to give anything. And so it leaves him kind of wondering, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? So if I could, knock, knock, who's there? Me, it's Stephanie too. I would say, like, girl, you have to learn to communicate. You can't demand so much of him, and you want to see a grown man, and you want to see somebody who's ready for marriage and who's serious to be a husband, but you're not showing up as a grown woman, and you're not showing up as a wife or someone who's serious for marriage. Part of that is, effective communication, and it's difficult. So I'm not going to say that it's easy to kind of turn that on and off. If you shut down, you will continue to do that. It's not easy just because you're married, but you want to put these things into practice, because whether you learn to do it before or during, you're going to learn how to do it if you want to have a successful marriage. And over time, if that's something you struggle with, it'll become less and less frequent. But it doesn't go away. A lot of people need to realize that. But just because you're in a relationship or just because you get married doesn't mean you automatically get this super cape on where you are your best self all the time. You will 100% revert back to all the habits that create who you are. And you want to make sure that you just start chipping away at these character defects that kind of get in the way of sustaining, a romantic relationship. They probably get in the way of other types of relationships too. However, those relationships are more flexible. Your family, your friends, coworkers, you don't have to, shift consciousness and who you are to make those relationships work, because you're not building a life with any of those people. So that's just something that I would offer Stephanie, and I'm sure she'll get it, but clearly it was a very good reflection of what she has already told us, that she's not a good communicator. So I'm looking forward to see how that matriculates in the next episode. So Alma and Michael. So Alma and Michael, they end up doing a helicopter ride that leads them to a cave where they actually have to crawl through a cave. It was, I'll be honest, it was kind of weird. I don't know that I'd want to, I do know that I would not want to do that. Michael is claustrophobic. He also has this fear of being like buried alive, and he's very anxious about it. The good thing about him is that regardless of how anxious he was, he definitely manned up, and he definitely, took the lead, and because she wasn't really comfortable either, and he saw that, and despite how he felt, he made sure to go ahead of her and support her as she was kind of struggling throughout the cave. And then they made it together, mission accomplished. So it was good for him to kind of push past his anxiety, push back his fears, because it always benefits not only the other person, but it benefits you. Ultimately, you benefit from pushing past what, is not keeping you from moving forward in whatever area it is. So it's good for him ultimately, but it's also good for the betterment of their relationship and them kind of supporting each other. So that was good to see. They end up having to spend the night in the cave, which neither one of them wanted to do, because it was just kind of weird. And it didn't help that he had already had a fear of being buried alive. But they spent the night together, which was the first time that they actually spent the night in the same place. And then they woke up together, had breakfast. She was fixing breakfast. They have a very good dynamic, which I enjoy seeing. So I think all in all, they did do a pretty good job together. Mission accomplished. They pushed each other. They supported each other. I'm just looking for that spark coming up, but I think over time it can build. So we'll see them moving forward. There's nothing else that really stuck out to me with them. I think they're kind of trotting along, and this was like a very simple, forward-moving episode for them. So that is Alma and Michael. And Jenna and Cale. Whew, okay. So Jenna and Cale go and they have like a spiritual experience with a shaman, and Cale, it's not that he's not into it, I just don't think that that's kind of what he does. And you can see that Jenna is in her element here. This is kind of what she does, and she's comfortable, and she even says that spirituality is an important thing in a relationship. And Cale is kind of just trying to find his way in this experience. The good thing about Cale is that he is open. He is open to every experience. He's not judging it. It may not even make sense for him, but he's kind of like down for the cause no matter what. And so they go through the experience, and she's talking about, have you found yourself, essentially? And he says, I am, learning to find myself. So we see them have kind of like a good time there. And she talks about, the more you lend yourself to just wanting to find yourself, the more you'll find yourself. So he recognizes that she's wanting more of him, to be open. So they pop open a bottle, and they just are having a lovely conversation. It's beautiful out, and he's saying, I know that you want me to be more open, and I struggle with being more open. Hats off to him for even say that, because people usually don't even say that. They just display it in their actions. They never really are often accountable or even struggle with saying, hey, this is really difficult for me. We just see that it's difficult. We see the effects of that. So I was happy to see that. And so he shares with Jenna how when he was younger, he struggled with social anxiety, so much so that he didn't even like to go out to recess, which is a big deal. If you take yourself back to being in school and being a child, like recess is like the event of the day. You know, lunch and recess, those are like the two events. And so to think of a little kid struggling with that, that's a very stressful experience. And then so to combat that, as he got older, he shared that he really did a 180 and kind of presenting that I don't really need anyone, you know, wanting to be independent, so that I would assume it's not to suffer the feelings of having such anxiety about needing to be in a social space, which is a big deal considering you guys have been on a rocky start and really haven't shared much. You guys are getting there, but not really. And she shit all over it, for a lack of a better word. She basically was like, you know, I hear you and thanks for sharing, but I feel like you're telling me that because that sounds like what you should be saying, but it's not really, you know, real, and I don't really feel it. And it's just like, girl, let him live, let him breathe, you know, like, let's say, just for the sake of this example, that what she is saying is true. Your approach isn't inviting to even open up the door for something that is what you identify as being real. And for him, it's real. That's his experience. That's a valuable experience. And maybe she's looking for a level 7 on a 1 to 10 scale, and he gave a 1. This is the space that he's in where he gave a 1. And you can see, no, it wasn't the deepest, darkest secret, but you can see that he was starting with something, and he's pushing himself to share something that he hasn't shared before, and something that he's struggled with someone that he has struggled with. So it was kind of off-putting to watch that exchange, because it really didn't have to go anywhere. I wish she just didn't even say anything. So they, you know, of course he snaps, and he basically says, you know, this is why I don't want to talk to you, I don't trust you, you know, why? And basically they keep going at it. So eventually they separate. I'm assuming they spend the night separately. He goes for a run in the morning. The next day she spends her own time. She goes to a crystal shop. I'm assuming she has had time to process this, because she's understanding that, or she says that she's understanding that he was trying to share something with her, and she buys a crystal, something that symbolizes love, but I don't necessarily know it to be romantic love, but I'm not really 100% sure, but it's something surrounding around like pure love or something, which was very nice because that is a major olive branch. She does not give it to him in this episode. She says she'll save it for another time, but it was good to see that there's an awareness for both of them. And as people, we react. Sometimes it's not the best, but it's really, what do you do after that? Do you stay in that and you continue to go down a bad path, or do you have a come to Jesus moment where you start to realize, okay, this is not how I should have reacted, or this is not beneficial to the relationship, or this is not in conjunction with the goal that I want, so how do I change it? And that's okay. So all in all, jam-packed episode. I'm getting more accustomed to these couples and kind of how this is going. So I'm excited to kind of keep going. I finally am in the groove of this, and we'll continue to do my reviews weekly. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about this new show. I mean, it's season 1, so it's pretty early. It's a new concept, and let me know what you think about the couples. Hope everybody enjoyed. Please click subscribe and comment, and I'll see you next week.